Oh my god. Hey there guys, I'm back to another game review. Today we'll be taking a look at probably the most anticipated remaster of all time, the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy on the PlayStation 4. So how did this remaster come about? Many Crash Bandicoot fans, including myself, have been wanting a remaster of the original Naughty Dog Trilogy for many years. I started my journey with the Naughty Dog Trilogy around 2010. I never did finish Crash 1 due to its difficulty, but I did finish Crash 2 and 3, which I thoroughly enjoyed. When it was announced that they were remastering the original trilogy at E3 2016, I was really excited. I could not believe that they had finally decided to remaster this collection. Even if you weren't a Crash Bandicoot fan, you could definitely feel the excitement and hype from this single announcement. The collection was being developed by Vicarious Visions, the people behind the Skylander series. At first, I was worried about this choice, but later that year, we got the first gameplay trailer for the game, along with the official title and release window of 2017. The game honestly looks stunning and a surprising showcase since the game was announced earlier that year. I pre-ordered the game a month before its release, and I was really hyped. Like, I haven't played these games in years, but I was excited to revisit them on the PlayStation 4. These Crash Bandicoot games are 3D platformers originally released in the late 90s by Naughty Dog. All of the games revolve around precise platforming, breaking boxes, and stopping the main baddie, Cortex. For this review, I decided to play through the collection 2 times over to fully understand each game. My first playthrough was from a much more amateur perspective, and my second playthrough was from a much more experienced perspective. Starting off with Crash Bandicoot 1, this game dates back to 1996 where 3D platformers were starting to thrive. During this same year, Super Mario 64 came out only 20 days after Crash Bandicoot in North America. In Crash 1, you'll be platforming, destroying boxes, and collecting Wumpa Fruit. You'll be exploring areas of the jungle, chemical factories, and Cortex's base, just to name a few. Levels always bring a sense of challenge, with platforming being the main focus. The boss fights are probably the best out of the trilogy. A lot of the boss fight patterns took me a while to learn compared to the later games. While playing Crash 1 for the first time in years, I found the game to be challenging, which is good. Vicarious Visions did not change anything about the original's difficulty, which I can appreciate. I was getting game over after game over, but when I was doing my second playthrough, I actually didn't get a single game over. The 3 rules that kept me from getting game overs in my second playthrough were patience, trial and error, and the D-pad. By being patient and watching how enemies and hazards move within a level, I was able to get past obstacles a lot easier than if I had tried to speed run through a level. Trial and error sort of goes hand in hand with patience. You're bound to die in a level, but if you're able to identify the mistake that caused your death, you'll get further into the level. And finally, the D-pad. You are now able to move with the analog stick in Crash 1, but the D-pad just makes the game so much easier because of the level design. There's a lot of small platforms that leave no room for error. While Vicarious Visions didn't just want to make the game look prettier, they did add some things into Crash 1. First up, a improved save feature. Now you're able to save whenever you want. There's also a auto-saving feature if you want to use it. Bonus rooms now can be attempted as many times as possible, not losing a life while dying in said bonus room. They also act as checkpoints upon completion. Time trials were added into the first game, adding replay value to those interested. Lastly, you're able to play as Coco, Crash's sister. She handles identically to Crash, and you can only play her within certain levels. The only change that negatively impacts the game is Crash's jump. This was discovered by Ding Dong VG on Twitter. His jump is slightly faster than the original game, and when jumping in place, you will eventually fall off for some strange reason. This actually happened to me once when I was recording Coco footage from Crash 3. Coco just fell off the box when I was not touching the controller. It kind of surprised me in all honesty. This faster jump arguably makes the game a lot harder. That's like the only problem with this collection as a whole at the moment, but other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed my experience with Crash 1. The gameplay is challenging and still holds up to this day. Moving on to Crash 2, Cortex Strikes Back, this game took what Crash 1 did so well and improved upon it. First up, they added a crouch button. With this ability, Crash is able to duck under certain obstacles. Also, if you are moving and hit the crouch button, you'll do a slide and be able to follow up with a high jump or a spin attack. The crouch button just adds a lot of mobility for Crash that was not seen previously. Levels are designed on the much easier side, I would say. Accessing each level also became a lot easier. Instead of having a big map for level selection, they split it up into 5 sections, each section containing 5 levels and a boss fight. This just made it a lot easier to revisit levels, which is a nice convenience. This game originally introduced analog control for this series, which shows within the level design. Jumps are not as precise as they were previously. The boss fights in this game are really easy. Some are a little harder than others, but they're overall not as difficult as the first game's boss fights. The 3 rules I mentioned earlier still apply to Crash 2 and 3. Being patient and learning from your mistakes is still a major part of Crash 2 and 3, but the usage of the D-pad can be used less frequently. You can play as Coco in Crash 2 as well, with the same restrictions of only within certain levels. When I played this game for the first time, I did get a lot of game overs like I did within Crash 1, but not as many. When I was revisiting it for my second playthrough, I would still get some game overs due to my mistakes, but also there aren't as many boxes / Wumpa fruits to collect, so your life count will not be as high. Overall, I would say Crash 2 is just a much better game than Crash 1. With the addition of the crouch button and the level design being a little more forgiving, this game is just a lot more enjoyable. Still my favorite Crash Bandicoot game out of the trilogy. Crash 3 Warped is where I would say Naughty Dog got a little experimental. First up, they added levels where there's no platforming involved. Some of them featured Crash, but most of them had Coco as the playable character. Levels like jet skiing and piloting a plane are just filler levels that added no real enjoyment for me. There are also underwater levels, which are just slow and boring. The core levels are still enjoyable. All of the Crash 2 goodness is still here. The level themes are based on certain periods of time, like medieval times or a prehistoric period, which is a lot cooler than the different climates of Crash 2. The level selection improved a lot from Crash 2. Instead of having a floor dedicated to one section of the game, it's now just one floor with all 5 sections together. The same amount of levels as Crash 2, 5 levels per section with a boss fight. The boss fights in this game are overall slightly harder than Crash 2. Not just the difficulty for these bosses were changed, but you're rewarded with a power-up for Crash after defeating a boss. The power-ups like having a longer spin attack or a double jump are pretty useful, but others like the Wumpa Fruit Cannon just feel too situational. My overall feelings of Crash 2 is kind of mixed. On one side, I love the platforming sections and the attempt to give Crash more abilities. On the other hand, the levels without platforming just feel like a drag. This is the easiest game out of the trilogy, I would say, but it's still a fine platformer. Crash 3 is so similar to Crash 2, but the experimental bits for Crash 3 just didn't work out for me. Crash 3 is still a good Crash game, but the addition of levels without platforming just make this game my least favorite out of the trilogy. Presentation wise, across all of these games, the game just looks beautiful. The sound design for this collection is really good as well. From the music to the sound effects to the voice actors, like everything is just done extremely well in terms of the presentation. So one of my final thoughts on the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy, this collection is great. Whether you've played these games in the past or never played them at all, pick this collection up if you're into 3D platformers. If you don't mind that Vicarious Visions decided to keep the difficulty the same and only add quality of life changes into the game, you'll have a lot of fun. The jump being slightly quicker is a minor complaint for me. It's not a game breaker for me personally. Crash still felt fine to control throughout the game. The game retails around $40 at the moment, which is a steal for a collection of games like this. If you played this collection already, what is your favorite game out of the trilogy? Be sure to leave that in the comment section below. So yeah, I think that is about it. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys haven't already, you can subscribe. I put new videos up every single Saturday. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. I would definitely appreciate that. Be sure to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter. I put updates of my future videos on there and other gaming stuff I talk about. My Twitch page, follow me on there as well if you want to see my live streams whenever I do those. And yeah, I think that is about it. Thank you guys for watching this video again. Now, see you guys next time with more videos. Game on, gamers.